So congratulations on that. And give us, everybody sits there and can play armchair quarterback on where they want to go. Give us your thoughts, and because you gave us a lot of really good feedback, all that, why you went where you went and what you wanted to get accomplished, because you did it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know not everybody feels that way, and that's okay. I mean, one of the special things about college hockey is the passion of the fans, and critiquing selections and bracketing is all part of that. And as a committee, we certainly understand that. College hockey selection process is so unique, as you know, in that there's no other sport in college athletics that has a strictly objective process for selecting the field. So, as you know, we put a lot of thought into the pairwise, but once that work is done and that formula is created, it then dictates the selection process. The bracketing, which is, I think, what you're talking about, is can be more challenging, and it involves other parameters, and some of those in no particular order. Obviously, bracket integrity is a very high priority for the committee, but it's not the only thing. And we've made a strategic decision that if a school is a host school in the regional, that they would be placed at their host site regardless of what their seed is. So that's a piece of the puzzle that dictates certain decisions. And we also care a lot about the event experience and the energy and the excitement in these buildings. This should be the most exciting time of the year in college hockey, and part of that is, these teams are playing in these supercharged atmospheres all year long. We want the regionals to feel that way also, and so that, along with the other parameters that I talked about, that is a factor. And so we do, without compromising the bracket integrity at a level that we don't feel comfortable with, we do look at building regional sites that will have that kind of energy and excitement. And I think, again, you never know if you're going to get it right, but I think we had great regionals. We had great crowds and packed buildings and great games, particularly the regional finals. And so, we feel good about it. And again, understanding not everyone's always going to agree with what we do.
You may have forestalled some of those arguments against the way it's been done by just the atmosphere and turnout this year. I mean, that you have to be ecstatic at how these four went.
Yeah, couldn't feel better about the way the regionals went, and that's a credit to these, the parity of college hockey and the teams. And I know there were some lopsided scores on the first day, and that certainly got all of our attention. But things really worked out well in the regional sites. And as you all know, that there's been a lot of discussion in the college hockey community over the years about what is the right model for these regionals, and should we be trying to incorporate on-campus facilities more? Should we even be looking at high seeds? And I go back a long way. I actually played in the NCAA tournament 30-plus years ago, back when I was at Vermont my junior year. We played Bowling Green in one of these total goals series. It was on their at their facility, and so I've seen that side of it. And there's some exciting aspects of being on campus sites, but I think right now there's pretty strong consensus amongst the college hockey community that this regional model is working. The neutrality piece, which we don't have 100%, because if a school is the host school, like Penn State in Allentown, it wasn't right on their campus, but that was certainly a home crowd for them. So we still incorporate that into the process. But it's something that we're always paying attention to. But you're right, this year was a great example of the regional format working well.
Let's please never go back to 2-game total goal series.
Yeah, don't worry. As long as I'm on the committee, I don't think there's much support for that.
There's been some discussion about maybe modifying or replacing the RPI with a new metric and maybe some changes there. What's in store for that?
We're always looking at the RPI, and it's obviously a big part of the pairwise. So it's something that we look at. You all are familiar with Tim Danahue, who's sort of our statistical guru, who we meet with on a regular basis, and it's really important that we get this metric right, because it is the selection process, and so we're always looking to make sure that the metrics that we're using are allowing us to pick the best teams for the field. And it's a little hard to test that and measure it, but Tim's pretty sophisticated, a lot more than the rest of us on the committee, and he helps us really think it through, and he puts it in terms that we can understand and apply to our knowledge of college hockey.
The next summer, or this summer I should say, you will have the interesting feat of getting to choose future sites. The bid process. Tell people about the timeline of that maybe first, and are there some cities that you just kind of know already that will be involving themselves in the bid process?
Yeah, there's historically, certain cities are going to be interested in this, and I don't. No state secrets here, but places like St. Paul and Boston that have historically been a part of. Tampa is obviously happy to continue to be hosting, but there's been some amazing Frozen Four sites that we've only gone to one time.
Washington, D.C. being one of them.
Actually, that was, Vermont, our team was there in 2009. That was a fantastic site. But, a lot of things have to come together. Obviously, there has to be the will on the part of the host city and the NHL team and the management, sometimes even the coaching staff. So it doesn't always come together. There's a lot of places that, we've all heard, why don't you go to Nashville? Sure. There's places that,
Mike Snee just brought it up, said his wish list would be Nashville.
Yeah, we all have sort of that list in our heads. But there's no shortage of great cities and facilities that want to host this event, and it's a credit to the college hockey community and our great fans who come out and support it, and so I'm excited for the process. And we're actually Vermont is the host institution in 2025 in St. Louis, so we're really excited for the Frozen Four to return to St. Louis. It's been a long time, and they did an amazing job in 2007 when they hosted last time. So that'll be great to get the Frozen Four back there. As you know, we're going to Vegas after that, which I'm sure will be popular with a large segment of the college hockey fans, and then we'll see, what the future holds.
Once again, you're welcome. When everybody's like, I love these sites, you're welcome.
Yes, Derek Schooley deserves a lot of credit for this.
I keep arguing it was me and Metcalf, and were you part of that yet?
Not in.
You weren't part of the last bid process.
No, I was not part of the last. I was just coming on the committee when you made those decisions.
Yeah.
A question that always does come up because you've had some issues, or the NCAA has had some issues, is getting enough regional hosts, getting enough regional bids. Do you feel confident that there will be enough balance between East and West for regional bids?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see some. The challenge was more in the West over the years, but there's some great. Fargo's been fantastic. Going to Sioux Falls next year, and St. Louis again. Not at the Blues Arena, but at the Centene Center, which is a great hockey venue. So I think there's more good sites emerging in the West, and the East, has had a pretty traditional, Worcester and Albany and Manchester and Bridgeport and Allentown, and Allentown's, I guess, technically considered West in Pennsylvania. So I think the regionals have been successful, and particularly when you have results like we had this past year, it helps spur other communities to be interested.
I think that's one thing that people don't understand, all the intricacies of the process, because there are so many things that have to happen for it to go right. Like everybody, how many times has Nashville been brought up in the last 2 days?
Oh,
everybody throws out Nashville. Well, first of all, they got to bid. They got to want it.
The NHL team has to want it,
and they got to give up the locker rooms part of the bid process. Yep. So there's so many things that you can't just say, let's do it here, and then all of a sudden it happens. It's not because the committee doesn't want to go to certain places. It's because that they're hamstrung.
Yeah, it's not as if the committee has a clean slate. We can just decide we're going to pick any building we want to go in any given year. There's a lot of pieces to it, as you said, Schools. And but I feel really good about the cities that are in line and what's to come after that as well.
What are you expecting from this weekend? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to give me your predictions on games, but I mean, just obviously great crowds, good atmosphere. Anything that fans can be excited about going into this weekend?
Well, I think that we have four exceptional hockey teams. I was staffed the Bridgeport Regional, so I saw Quinnipiac up close, and also made it up to Manchester for the BU Cornell final, and obviously, being part of Hockey East, I see BU quite a bit. So, and then I've watched a lot of Michigan and Minnesota all year. So there are 4 outstanding hockey teams. Anybody can win it. All 4 have really good fan bases and a lot of excitement just to be here. We're going to have 2 sold out. The semifinals today, and then the championship on Saturday will all be sold out. So it's shaping up to be a great Frozen Four. I think it's going to be really good hockey, and I can't wait to get started.
And the return of FanFest.
Yes, it'll be a nice FanFest. It's the weather.
Rain.
The weather here. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but living in Vermont, the weather never bothers me. I never even think about the cold and the snow. And then when I get off a plane here or walk outside the arena in shorts, I'm like, oh, this is not bad. Rob Higgins told the story about he was at the tarmac greeting all the teams when they came into Tampa, and it was pretty hot. You're out on this concrete, airport tarmac, and he was trying to shove the guys onto the bus as quickly as possible. It was like 95 on the tarmac, and he was trying to get on the bus. It's air conditioned. All these players from BU and Quinnipiac, Michigan, Minnesota, they just wanted to sit and hang out on the tarmac in the 90-degree weather. But
so when you're considering sites this summer, remember it was 85 and sunny in Pittsburgh yesterday.
We had a great. Pittsburgh was obviously a unique Frozen Four because of we were still very much in the throes of COVID. But Pittsburgh's an amazing city. I had a great experience there, and you guys and the organizing committee did an amazing job.
And you know what? Nobody really knows how close we were not to having a championship game.
That's
at one
true.
point on Saturday morning.
Yes, sir.
It's all in the past now.
Yeah.
That is history. But Jeff Schulman, chair of the Division I Men's Ice Hockey Committee, we appreciate you stopping by. We're expecting a great weekend here of games. So thanks for everything you do for college hockey, and we can't wait to see the puck drop tonight.
Thanks. I feel the same way, and thanks for everything you guys are doing. And USCHO is, it's a staple of the college hockey community. You guys do a great job, and it's much appreciated.
No, we appreciate that too.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more of USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Johnny Gaudreau.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Joe Pavelski. And Shane Gostisbehere were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
Welcome back to USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa at Harpoon Harry's Crab House, just a few minutes walk from Amalie Arena. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Welcome to our second hour. And Jim, why don't you introduce our next guest?
Yeah, we're pleased to be joined by the first-year commissioner of the NCHC, Heather Weems. Congratulations. We haven't really had a chance to even catch up and talk all season, but congratulations on year one in the books. Take us through it. How did it feel?
It's actually been a really good year, other than obviously this year we don't have anybody down in the Frozen Four, so, a little bit disappointing on that end. But coming from St. Cloud State, I spent 10 years as athletics director there, and certainly so the transition has been less than it might be for some folks, because I've really been part of it since the inception of the league. That said, I think all of us know that when you go from one position to another and you see the backside of it, there are things that you just didn't recognize. There are things that happen. The Frozen Face-Off, our conference tournament was phenomenal. We have such a great partnership with the Excel Center and the Wild, and their support is just incredible. So that becomes, just a great first-class event for our student athletes. And so I'm really proud of that. I've learned a lot about officiating and how much all sides love officials. And working through that a little bit. And obviously the athletics directors were all my peers previously, but seeing a different side and seeing a different way that they look at the league. And obviously as an AD, it's myopic, because you're looking only at how your institution works, and you want to be a good partner to the rest, but ultimately you have responsibility for your institution. And now it's trying to balance and talk and brainstorm a little bit about how do you make it, how do you, high tide rises all ships. How do you make sure that everybody's competing and a part of it?
Well, that's one of the things we talk about with all the commissioners, it seems. A lot of people just think, commissioners, they're the czar of their league. Well, you have 8 different bosses that you're answering to, and that's a very delicate situation all the time when you have to balance it. How difficult is it when you really think of it? And you knew all these people, as you said, right, but you're now in a situation where there are ADs and presidents that need your ear all the time.
Yeah, I think that the part that you have to remember is they are all charged by their own institutions, and particularly in higher education right now, where there's so much happening, and whether it's got to do with budgets or enrollment or everything like that. If you're working with presidents and chancellors, what you have to understand is, athletics is but, 5% of everything else that they're doing. And so how do you try to make sure that what you're saying, you're identifying priorities, you're being succinct in it, and you're trying to help them understand the landscape, because they're not going to be experts and read everything. They need to be advised in a way that can be helpful to them. I think the same a little bit, with coaches and athletics directors. It's trying to understand from each of their perspectives what matters and how they need to look at it, but then keep in mind that, again, the importance of success of the league brings everybody to a higher level.
How do you feel, this being your first year, but watching it from the other side, how do you feel that the future of hockey and all the different conferences, because everybody's scared to death right now. It's from what we talked about. We're trying to pump brakes on it, but everybody's scared that the Big Ten is going to run off and be the super conference, where 10 years ago everybody was scared the NCHC was going to run off and be the super conference. So where do you see the landscape of hockey right now after going from an AD to a conference commissioner?
I mean, the reality is the landscape is what it is. I think we're all, even ADs, everybody's wondering a little bit where the NCAA is going to land and how is NIL going to adjust, and what does the transformation committee mean, and how is that all going to play out. But there's some realities there. None of the other hockey conferences have the Big Ten media agreement, and that's just not a reality for us. I'm going to go back, and I'm a purist and I'm simple in some ways, but the leverage that I think remains in all institutions, and you saw it a little bit in basketball this year at the Final Four, arguably they've had big-name schools throughout the history who have, oftentimes arrived. But you had essentially 4 kind of no-name, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but lesser-known institutions who advanced. The culture of programs still matters. I think the communication and the work that coaches and their support teams do with student athletes, and particularly to show them that there's a pathway to the professional ranks, continues to mean something. And so I think within each of the institutions and each of the conferences, we have to identify what our best leverage points are. And then we have to double down on those perspectives. And each of them is a little bit different. But the nice part in hockey, the talent pool coming in is wide enough and deep enough that you can, with 62 programs, 63 programs, whatever we have, I still think that you can build that depth. And then the difference is that, and this has happened in hockey for years, the experience of upperclassmen who maybe aren't as skilled but stay for 3 and 4 years make up in some cases for the really high skill talent of the first year and second year players who sign an NHL contract after a year or two.
And that's usually coming from a program that has older players. We beat Michigan one year, we swept Miami, and people are like, how did you do that? Like, well, we have 23, 24-year-old men playing against 18-year-old boys.
I hold up my cell phones all the time and I say, there's more information in this cell phone than you can get anywhere than we've ever had in history. You know, like I joke that I looked up the Encyclopedia Britannica, and that's like one millipiece of what's available here. But what you don't have, the only way to get wisdom is through experience. There is a difference between a 20-year-old player and a 23-year-old player. And in hockey, that plays itself out in the tournaments. And again, I think that we're going to continue to see different institutions and different conferences leverage that.
You, as an AD, got to watch Josh Fenton and what happened with the NCHC. And we've kind of talked over the years about how that conference has really propelled all of college hockey forward in things like video and social media and so forth. How do you see... How has the role of a commissioner changed, and how do you see that going forward in the future, especially since you and all of your colleagues next year are going to have 5 years or fewer on the scene?
You know, I think that what we're continually looking at is building that fan experience, and that hockey remains a niche sport. It's not broad as much as football is, as much as basketball is. But I think that the depth of interest by our fans is pretty substantial. And so telling those stories, and I'll even go, I think that we can learn something from this past weekend in the women's Final Four. Mostly people have not clued into women's basketball. What did they do from a media standpoint? They told stories. I can tell you, Caitlin Clark and Reese are now household names in places they never were. Mm-hmm. So how do we learn from that? How do we tell those stories? How do we get that interest level? Because what the layperson really wants is to know these kids. I mean, even coming from St. Cloud State, what does college athletics offer that I would say professional doesn't? It's that touch. These kids they're your next door neighbor. They're people that you know, and I think leveraging that and making sure that we're telling and continuing to talk about these students as humans, as people that you see next door, as models and role models for our young kids who are playing. I mean, I have 4 boys at home who all played hockey, and they can tell you who all of the St. Cloud State players were because that's who they grew up with. That's what we have to continue to recycle, and so media plays, and the kids all see it here, as do fans. And
coaches, too. There's no Division I sport at this level of prominence where the coaches are so accessible to people. It's really amazing. You try to get a Power 5 D1 basketball coach on the phone, that's not going to happen. And we get to reach out. Derek's easy to get a hold of, but I mean, right. There are a whole bunch of others that will take the time for media outlets and fan experiences and so forth in ways that you don't see other places. And
I think that's, again, what you have to identify is what does hockey bring to the table and how do we do it differently? It's not just that you take a model of basketball or football and you emulate it. You say, okay, what do our fans want? How do we deliver on that content? And with social media, I mean, the interesting part about social media is in one way it makes it easier because it's available to everyone. The hard part, and certainly I found this as an athletics director, is when you got all of your news in the local print paper or by the radio station that was at town, everybody was looking at the same thing. Now you're trying to meet everybody where they're at. Some people are Twitter folks, some people are Instagram folks, some people, are going to websites. But the workload of the sports information folks has increased simply because they've got to cover the content on so many mediums.
you kind of touch on media right there, and NCHC was really the first online league-only platform. Really stands alone to this day. I mean, Flow Hockey feels like it, but it's still very different. But NCHC TV is still in existence, still getting good subscription, and the CBS channel. How pleased are you with your current media package?
I think that it's been in a lot of ways a home run for us because, and that was a discussion we had a couple of years ago about, do we look at a different platform? What do we gain by owning our own? And the reality is we own all of the storytelling, and not from a selfish perspective, but that gives us our opportunity to really showcase what we want to. The content is all there. It's a one-stop shop. We need to continue to invest in that at our institution level and make sure that the cameras that we have and, the product that we're putting out, the color and play-by-play commentary is great, but I still think it enables us to brand in a different way because all we're covering is the NCHC. And from our style and from our perspective and giving a little bit, I mean, I love the games that Sam and Michael on my staff, they put together when we do Media Day. We do a whole bunch of content at the beginning of the year that we can use throughout the year that just gives a piece to our fans of what does it look like to be in the locker room with these guys.
So how's it been dealing with coaches? Because as an AD, and I deal with an AD, you go in and you always are asking for things and wanting to get something. And now dealing with all your coaches in your league, sometimes you can get a little fired up with the commissioner. How has that been different than with an AD? Because kid gets suspended, doesn't get suspended. You're the one taking those calls now.
It's different. I miss that part. I mean, one of my favorite parts of being an AD was the day-to-day contact with the coaches. Like, I look at athletic departments, and the reality is it is the success of the coaches and the work that they do with the student athletes that is the engine of the department. So I miss that because I don't have that same daily contact, and the reality is I'm not the boss. So, they're not going to come and ask. The problem solving is different. They're on a day-to-day basis. And, I joke that my job, even as AD, wasn't to know the X's and O's. It was to help them navigate the obstacles and the relationships and, those sorts of things, and take the obstacles and, finances and those sorts of things out of the picture as much as I could. I think as a commissioner, it's still trying to build that credibility and trust. Make sure that you demonstrate to them that you have an understanding of their particular institution and the challenges that they face that may be different than another institution, while still trying to say, but we've got to take this bigger global approach to it because, again, high tide rises all ships, and we need everybody to buy into the philosophy, and particularly at our institutions where hockey is almost in all cases the main premier flag bearing sport. And so it's not just about the hockey teams. It's literally, the presidents are saying, how do we continue to keep that? Because that's alumni engagement, that's sponsorship money, that's community relationships, town gown relationships. And so, in working with the coaches, I miss the day-to-day banter. I think that I'm a little bit of a nerd, so, I talking at that higher level and trying to get them to buy in and understand how we can all achieve together is the challenge, but also the fun of it.
No coaches yell when their players get suspended, though?
They're not necessarily no, they're not necessarily happy, but we talk through things and we continue to work on communication, so we manage and navigate.
We talked a little bit about NCHC TV, but your national contract with CBS Sports Network has really given the league a lot of prominence right from the get-go, and also the member institutions a little bit of promotion and name recognition.
Yeah, CBS, and there's, again, such a great partner, and what I love is their team, particularly their talent with Dave, Shireen, and Alex. They tell the stories. Like the research that they do, you can't pay for that. The ability for them to bring in the stories. And again, we're all marketing is all storytelling. But the time that they spend, making their understanding of our programs and what's going on and our student athletes and talking about connections is so important. And CBS simply it gives us a credible, world-renowned approach, for a league that in the West of hockey could get lost a little bit, but they give us a presence across the country and really globally just because of the quality and the understanding of what CBS Sports is.
You mentioned you don't have a team here, but you've been to Frozen Fours before, obviously with St. Cloud. I remember them just a couple of years ago. What do you look forward to out of this weekend, and how great of a setting is this here in Tampa?
Well, I have mentioned to maybe a couple people that if we put Tampa on the rotation every 2 to 3 years, I'm not sure those of us in the north, I still think I have 18 inches of snow on my front lawn. So those of us who are coming south would certainly take that. I just think this is the epitome of sport. Like, as I was walking over here this afternoon, and yesterday was a little bit quieter, people hadn't started getting in quite as much. But this is what it's about. Like when you attach sports to higher education, it is about bringing people together. There's nothing like sport that unifies folks. There's no other thing that is a medium quite like doing that. And as I walk in, and you've got your Michigan fans and you've got your BU fans, and there's buzzing all around. This is what it's all about. So it's just about the energy and the excitement, and creating an environment where our young players get to showcase themselves on the highest level. That's what they want. They want that excitement. They want stands that are filled. They want noise. They want to be able to showcase what they've worked for all year. And I think that Tampa is a great environment for that. As is Minneapolis, as is so many places, this just has a lot more sunshine.
What about balloons? What'd you learn about balloons?
So I came in, and I have termed a new coin or termed a new phrase called trademark it, balloon envy, and that's when administrators notice that one team has lots of balloons and maybe they don't have enough, and so they make big purchases to ensure that there are balloons available.
That seems like what has happened in this building today.
So when she was waiting, she was in the midst of red and white balloons.
Yep.
Yes.
And BU didn't have enough balloons, so they went out and bought more balloons.
Yes.
All within a couple hours.
Yes, it's perfect.
I want to know who's got $3,000 worth of balloons just laying around to deliver in a day.
Well, I thought there was a shortage on helium, so I'm a little bit surprised.
Well, Heather, it is great to finally get you on our podcast. We've always tried to maintain great relationships with the commissioners, so thank you for taking the time out today. We hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Tampa. We'll be catching up with you throughout the season and obviously Frozen Fours going forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the time.
And we're going to take a break, and we'll come back to preview tonight's semifinal matchups. You're listening to USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.
Passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Jonathan Taves.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Joe Pavelski. And Johnny Gaudreau were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
Welcome back to USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa. We're at Harpoon Harry's Crab House. I'm Ed Trefzger, Derek Schooley also joining me with our two guests for this segment. We're going to be previewing both of the semifinal games today. Andrew Mahoney from the Boston Globe, and from the Rink Live, Jess Myers, kind of representing an East and West perspective on the teams, the ones that you see more often. So we might as well just jump right into
we had
it.
to kick Jimmy out of here for the second. He's gone.
Yeah, we got Jimmy kicked out of here for a little bit. He's glad handing and backslapping around the.
He likes the BU area right now.
Yeah. So we ended up with what are probably the four best teams, or four of the five best teams. Arguably the best teams to constitute a Frozen Four in a while. And we have the opportunity for an all Big Ten matchup, or the possibility of an all East matchup, or a mix-up of both. But kicking off at 5 o'clock, we've got Minnesota and BU. BU, a terrific season under new first-year head coach Jay Pandolfo, a legend with a program and a guy with NHL experience. Andrew, what is the BU team been like, and what is maybe the compelling argument for why they are the best contender possibly for the national championship, if you had to make that case?
Depth. And one of the things they haven't had in a long time is the fact that they have 10 seniors on the team. That typically there's a lot of roster turnover, kids either turning pro or transferring to another program. Those seniors decided, as juniors, they decided to come back for one more season, and so he really, Jay Pandolfo really points to that as one of the driving factors, that they've had this buy-in, and I think it points to the other big word that they use is accountability. How Jay's able to hold the team accountable, and Jay points to the seniors as holding the younger players accountable, and so that really seems to be the driving factor for them this year.
Now, Jess, for Bob Motzko at Minnesota, maybe not quite as old a team, definitely not quite as old a team, but Motzko also has been pointing to upperclassmen leadership. This is probably the easiest case that anybody would make, but what's the case for Minnesota being this year's national champion?
It's interesting you ask that, or you bring that part of it up, the age factor. 5 years ago, about this week, Bob Motzko got hired. Everybody makes campaign promises. We hear that in election years. First thing he said was, we're going to get older as a program. This is 5 years ago. They haven't really done that. He's admitted it. He said, well, okay, first we're going to get younger, then we're going to get older. With that said, getting those three defensemen to come back, Faber, Lacombe, Johnson, all of whom probably could be playing with their respective NHL teams right now. I mean, I think Johnson could play on Buffalo's blue line. I think Faber could play on Minnesota's blue line. I think Lacombe could definitely play on Anaheim's blue line, with a team that struggled like they have. He didn't expect all three of those guys to come back. I don't know if he expected Matthew Nyes to come back. So when he got all of those guys coming back for another year, they got a little taste of the Frozen Four last year, but bowed out after one game and said, okay, let's try this again. Then you add the youth of Logan Cooley and Snuggerud and Middlestead and some of these young guys that he's added that have been really key pieces. It's a good mix of veterans and youthful leadership.
I think if you break this game down, you break it down in obviously three parts. You got the goalie.
Yep.
Arguably Drew's probably hotter right now a little bit, but not a big. The D are the really interesting part, because I think both blue lines are very mobile. Both blue lines can really push the puck up the ice. And I think whoever my opinion will be, whatever D plays better in this game will dictate where the game goes, because the forwards do as well. So if you're breaking down each position, you got to go goalie, blue line, forwards. Who's got the advantage between those?
It's an interesting question, and you have to look at what the Gophers did in the regional. There's so much talk about that top line.
But you're going to be West biased first, so then we'll go East after that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fine. You look at what Minnesota did in the regional. So much attention paid to that top line of Nyes, Snuggerud, and Cooley, and rightfully so. They scored 13 goals in Fargo, and Matthew Nyes didn't have a point, not a goal or an assist. That's actually a pretty good sign for Minnesota, that they were able to win those two games without that kind of contribution that they've gotten all season. So I really think, you're absolutely right, Schooley, in that veteran defense is going to dictate this, and I like the defense Minnesota has. The goaltending is... We don't talk about Justin Close enough, or at least Bob Motzko doesn't think we do. And I joke about this, but I said, here's Justin Close's biggest problem. It's not that he's a bad goalie. He's a boring goalie. He's in position all the time. Every puck hits him right in the middle of that M in his chest. He never makes big sprawling saves, anything like that. He's not a huge guy. He just plays his position soundly, and that seems to work for him.
I mean, you can also almost say the same thing about Comesso, right, who was kind of overshadowed by Levi, who does make those acrobatic saves. And, their defense for BU, it's interesting because, you got sort of the Smurfs up front, when you have Fensore and Hudson. And so they really push the puck up. But then they do have some size. Weber and Copeland. Weber's been blocking 6 or 7 shots. I think he blocked a total. I'm sorry, 6 or 7 is an exaggeration. He blocked a total of 9 shots in the regional last week. And they really make life easier for Comesso. One thing, when you talk about that top line for Minnesota, BU sort of faced that against Western Michigan last week. And, of course, they were the higher seed, so they had the option of rolling out the lines later. They won't have that option against Minnesota, obviously. But, Pandolfo, they kept on rolling out their fourth line, and that was a little bit bigger. That would match up against their top line. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Minnesota today in that powerful offensive first line, but that might be one strategy.
I think one of the things you're going to see, and if I'm talking about the game, is more like it was 2-minute media timeouts in the regionals. Mm-hmm. You're going to have 2.5 minutes now, and sometimes 2:40. Mm-hmm. They're never really right on that 2:30 mark. So you're going to see these long timeouts. You're going to see top lines play more.
Yep.
And that's the hard thing of a depth team.
Yep.
If you want to go 4 lines deep, it's going to be harder to get those fourth lines in because you always can go back to your one guys after the media timeouts.
I'll say this, covering Big Ten hockey. I've gotten really spoiled for the last couple of years. All this talk about speeding up the game in baseball. Big Ten put those moves in 3 years ago during coming out of the pandemic to shorten the games, less time on the ice, less chance for virus transmission, whatever it was. 1 media timeout a period, 12-minute breaks in between periods. Man, we're out of there in 2 hours and 20 minutes sometimes. It's fantastic. So you get into a game like this where you're getting all those extra breaks, and Bob Motzko admitted it in Fargo. He used those to his advantage because you've got more time to get guys rest, and you can roll 2 or 3 lines where, he's usually rolled 4 lines all season.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Hudson out there for 40 minutes. I mean, it really does change the game quite a bit.
But you might not see the fourth line out there at all.
I would think, I would think that they would try to change it up somewhat just because they were so successful, and they got that size. You're talking Armstrong, Stevens, Kaplan. There's some good size with that line.
You mentioned Lane Hudson, somebody who a lot of people have the opinion was snubbed for the Hobie, but this is one of these years where you had so many good players. We're going to see some on both teams, obviously some, maybe it's an exaggeration to say generational, but maybe not. We're going to see some dynamic players on each team. In addition to Hudson, who are some players that fans should be looking to see? And then, of course, we'll have Jess just read down the whole roster for the Gophers. But who should we be watching for?
Well, someone who looked really impressive last week and probably could have been the MVP of the regional. Comesso ended up being, and I have no quarrel with that. But Ethan Phillips really just came to life for BU last week. He looked dynamic. Had a solid weekend all around. Fensore, he's their captain. He's sort of their ride or die. He looked like in the quarterfinals against Vermont. He looks like he suffered a serious injury. We didn't think he'd be back. By the following Friday, he was back in the semifinals in the Hockey East against Providence. They got these big defensemen that I mentioned earlier, Weber and Copeland, that are sort of further down the line, but they block a lot of shots. This Jay O'Brien is having a great year. Brown is second in scoring and has been a huge addition since he came over from Lowell. This is his second year with the program. So those are some of the guys that you can kind of look out for.
Jess, the Gophers roster?
We know all about the top line. We've talked about the second line a lot of Mason Nevers, Jackson Nelson, the big body in the middle, and Bryce Brodzinski, who was the MVP of the regional. They've got those 2 solid top 2 lines. Here's what I find interesting about this Gopher team. Look out for this third line. You've got Rhett Pitlick, whose father played in the NHL. His brother is playing, bouncing around the NHL currently. And then Aaron Huglin, who's a kid from Roseau, Minnesota, up in the north part of the state. So he wears number 7 because Neil Broughton wore number 7 for the Gophers, and he's a Roseau guy as well. But he had a play last year in the regional against UMass in overtime where he got the puck behind the UMass net and just wouldn't let go of it. Guys are trying to knock him off, and he's turning his body and spinning. And I asked him, where did you learn that? He said, this is a game from Roseau that they play on the pond called Scrub, which is one guy against everybody else on the ice. You have no teammates. Your job is to hold on to the puck as long as you can, and if you lose it, whoever's got it, you try and get it away from him. The coaches up there hate it because nobody passes the puck. It teaches you to be a puck hog, but he learned this weird skill of being able to protect the puck in the corners. It's fun to watch when he gets going doing that stuff.
Prediction before we go on to the next one? Your guys' prediction. Yeah, what do you got?
I'll say 4-1 Minnesota.
That's a tough one. Minnesota's playing really well. BU just seems to find a way to win. I'm going to go BU 3-2.
As I would have thought.
There you go. Well, let's take a look at the other half of the matchup, Michigan and Quinnipiac. And Jess, once again this year, Michigan came into 3M Arena at Mariucci and upset, not upset, but spoiled the party, let's say, for the home-standing Gophers. Very tumultuous season in times for Michigan, starting in the offseason and then player illness and finally taking the interim tag off of Brandon Naurato. What do we look for from Michigan? What's the compelling story for them to win tonight and maybe the championship?
I love that Brandon Naurato for about 2 weeks now has been trying to change the narrative or change the character, the story about his team. After they beat Penn State 2-1 in overtime, he said, we can play defense. We have structure, all this stuff that people have been accusing them of not having all year, that they're just kind of this run-and-gun, advanced pond hockey kind of team. With that said, they attack in the blue paint unlike any team I've seen in a long time. I said the kind of goals they scored against Minnesota in that Big Ten championship game were hack away at the puck until you see the red light kind of goals. And they can play that kind of gritty, down-low game. I still don't think they're an elite defensive team. Obviously, Luke Hughes is one of the great, talented, puck-moving guys, but you don't think of him as a defensive defenseman. You think of him as a play-controlling guy. Eric Portillo has not had the year that he had last year, but he's still a big body, fills a lot of the net. So they're a fun team, and I'll say it. 3 weeks ago when they came back to beat Minnesota in that championship game, talking to some folks after that one, having a beer, I said, hey, I'd take that matchup again, 3 weeks from now in Tampa if that's going to be the championship game.
That would really be something. But you want to talk about a team that's structured and can play defense and follow systems. Quinnipiac may be the best at that in the country.
Yeah, I saw them twice this year. I saw them opening game against Boston College where they just suffocated BC. That was a BC team too. It was their first game under Greg Brown, and they had a lot of roster turnover. But they went up to Chestnut Hill, and it was 4-0, and it didn't even feel that close. Then the other time I saw them, they came into Harvard, which had been undefeated at home, and was really looking for some retribution. Was looking to get a split, and again, Quinnipiac just suffocated them, beat them 3-0, and that ended up being the only time Harvard lost at home all year.
Go ahead.
No, I'll just come back to the offense. Really, to me, this game comes down to Michigan's offense versus Quinnipiac's defense a little bit. Talk a little bit about their structure and their style of where you think that this game will play out between that. Well,
I think they're certainly going to count on. It's another veteran-laden team, and you got some veteran defensemen back there playing in front of Peretz. In schools that you might want to look into this. Peretz and Levi both come from the same hockey camp up in Canada. I think coaches should be staking out that hockey camp and looking for the next great goalie. But
Quebec is that it?
Yeah. Imagine that.
You speak French, right?
Yeah.
Oui. Bueno.
But I think they'll match up well with them. I think they're counting on their veterans, and they went through this before. They lost in the regional final. It was interesting to hear Rand yesterday talk about that game where they fell behind 4-0. They ended up losing 7-4. He said he went back and watched the video. He thought they played great. He thought they got some great chances. They just gave up those early goals, and so I think sounds like he would be fine. if they played sort of the similar style, they just didn't make some of those mistakes that they made early on last year.
Who do you got in goal between the two goalies? We talked about the matchups, goalie, D, forward.
I think Parrots is the best goalie here in this tournament without question. Now, here's what I'm interested to see about this Michigan-Quinnipiac game. The first 5 shots on goal by Michigan. If none of them go in the net, all of a sudden Michigan starts thinking, wait a minute, we got all this offense. We're supposed to score some of these.
But they can play a tight game, though.
Yeah, but that throws you off your game a little bit. Likewise, if Parrots gives up an early goal, which he's not used to doing, then all of a sudden Quinnipiac thinks, wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen. This is what's fun about these matchups. Last year when you had Denver matching up against that really, really good Michigan team, the saying I said, the old Mike Tyson idea, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, Denver came out and punched Michigan in the face, and, they came back, they tied, they forced overtime, all that, but I don't think Michigan ever really recovered from that early punch that Denver threw at them.
These are both teams that can put up high 30s to 40 shots on net. If Quinnipiac puts up that many, Michigan's in trouble.
Yes.
But Quinnipiac possibly could survive that.
I would think so. With the defense and the goaltending they've got, absolutely. I mean, you want to talk structure. What Rand Pecknold has put together is just fantastic. And you use the word suffocating. I mean, it feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, and it's we've gone all this time without talking about Colin Graff, who, what an amazing story. He plays his freshman year at Union, comes over in his first year at Quinnipiac, becomes a Hobie top 10 finalist, puts up 50 points, leads the team in scoring as a sophomore. It's really interesting, just not only to fit in with that team that went to the regional final last year, but to make it and to lead the team in scoring, and now they're in the Frozen Four.
One of the interesting things about Quinnipiac is they're 1-3-1 in the neutral zone, and that's tough to get through. And Michigan, who wants to handle the puck, is going to really see some neutral zone where people are swarming on it.
Yep.
Will they want to dump the puck? Will they want to go dump it and get it back instead of turning it over and getting counterattacked? And that's the one thing. We always tried to stretch against Quinnipiac and get people behind the backside and tip and go. Will Michigan be able to play that kind of style if they're that good in the neutral zone?
I think they'll be forced to play that kind of style. If you get clogged up enough, we'll say, okay, let's try this and see if we can find some open ice that way. It is really interesting, too, to see what Michigan brings to this game. I'm fascinated by this. We're in Tampa, Florida. You've got 2 kids on this Michigan roster. This is a home game for them, basically. They've got 2 Floridians on the team. I mean, it's like, when did we think that would happen? So that's kind of fun, too.
Well, I guess we'll do the other half of this, the predictions for tonight's game between Michigan and Quinnipiac. Jess?
I say Michigan finds a way to win another tight game, like 3-1 with an empty net goal.
I guess I got to say East Coast again, too. So why not? School's kind of put that thought in my head. So, again, I hate to pick the same score, but I'm going to go 3-2, Quinnipiac winning a tight game.
So DraftKings got to go under on all of them?
I leave that to Jimmy and knowing the over/under. But yeah, if that's the case, then yeah, I anticipate low-scoring games. Watch, it'll be BC beat BU earlier this year 9-6. I don't think we'll see that, but I anticipate pretty low-scoring games.
For me, it's the battle of the backup goalie versus the assistant coach. Mike Corbett worked for me last year. Noah West is the backup for Michigan. There's my Robert Morris connection in that one.
There you go.
Is Noah West the guy that Dorado dressed as a forward when they had all the illnesses? I was at that game, and I can't remember who the...
Tyler Shea.
Yeah, they put a backup goalie in as a forward. That was such a weird weekend at Yost, because both teams had illnesses. Both teams had guys out of the lineup. Jackson Lacombe was playing forward for a shift, and he scored a goal. So he's versatile.
One kid played one game this year.
Yeah,
as a forward, as a skater.
Well, Andrew Mahoney, the Boston Globe, Jess Myers.
He couldn't make it.
That's this brother I've never met, right? Jess Myers of the Rink Live. Thank you for joining us, giving us a preview of tonight's games. Enjoy the games. Let's hope you have great stuff to write about tonight.
Thanks for having us.
That's all we hope for.
Thanks, Jeff.
And we'll break and we'll come back with our final thoughts on these games here on USCHO Frozen Four Live.
passion, talent, development. NCAA hockey offers all that, and its players graduate at a 90% rate. Johnny Gaudreau.
Backhand scores! Wow, what a goal!
Joe Pavelski. And Shane Gostisbehere were stars on campus before the NHL stage. Whether you are a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey. Visit collegehockeyinc.com and follow @collegehockey.
Champions of the college hockey world!
Welcome back to USCHO Frozen Four live in Tampa. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Derek Schooley, Jim Connelly. We heard the predictions from Jess and Andrew, and I thought they did a good job of breaking down what we're going to see. But now's our opportunity to talk a little bit about the games. Before we get into some of the X's and O's, which is really Derek's specialty, Jim, the betting lines on this are very interesting, especially as we've seen the odds break more and more in favor of Minnesota. In that game right now, DraftKings has Minnesota minus 205 and Boston University a plus 165. So a fairly considerable favorite there and an over-under of 6.5.
I mean, that's absolutely hammering Minnesota since the start of this week. I mean, this line has moved a little bit, but to see Minnesota minus 205 in a national semifinal seems a little off kilter here. Maybe a little just out of whack.
And for the folks who don't usually tune in to our weekly USCHO Edge podcast, just a quick explanation of what the plus and minus mean.
So if you're minus, you're the favorite. So for Minnesota, minus 205, I believe if I'm reading it right, you would have to bet $100 on Minnesota. I'm sorry, you would have to bet $205 on Minnesota to win 100. The opposite goes for Boston University, where they're plus 165. If you bet 100, you would win 165. Of course, you get your bet back when you win, so factor that into the payout. Over-under is another one. They're usually about the same number, minus 115. The house gets the juice, as they say. In this game, over, you mentioned 6.5, so you can bet either one team, both teams combined will score 7, both teams combined will score 6 or less, 7 or more, 6 or less. So that's where 6.5 comes in as an over-under. So I just look at Boston University as being one of the bigger underdogs we've seen in a national semifinal game. I mean, lines have not been around for these games for a long time, so we don't have a lot of historic numbers to compare this to. But last year, it was not this wide of a spread. This is one of the wider spreads we've seen, even in the tournament. I mean, you had some of the 4 versus 1 seeds that were, in maybe 100 points higher or lower on either side. But this one's pretty high for a national semifinal.
It doesn't seem too surprising that we might see a 7-goal game. That's like a 4-3 game.
Right. No, it's not shocking. I think if it's going to be BU's game, it's going to need to stay low. We're going to say the same thing about both of the semifinals, I think. If Quinnipiac is going to come out, or BU is going to come out with the upsets, they're going to have to probably stay a little bit lower in terms of goals allowed.
Yeah, and that really puts things back on the goaltenders. Drew Comesso has been spectacular.
Lights out. I mean, since his 4 losses in a row in the Beanpot and then a weekend series to Merrimack. He hasn't lost a game. And in that time, he's been allowing most times 2 goals or less.
And we talked a bit about Justin Close with Jess Myers. He's a guy who came in and it might not be a stretch to say he kind of rescued that program that was in deep trouble when he was called on a year ago. He could have been in deep trouble if he hadn't stepped up and been spectacular, and he's kept that starting role. That'll be a fun matchup to watch between those two netminders.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Comesso, he is their team right now. Obviously, their D is fantastic, but they're banged up on the back end a little bit. They should get Zabane, one of their centers, back today. That might be a big addition. If they get Wilmer Skoog, who's a top liner for their team, back, that did not sound... Jay Pandolfo did not sound very confident that Skoog would play today, but he did skate yesterday on the 5th line at practice. Any of those additions back to the lineup can help BU, but I still put all the pressure back on Comesso.
The other half of the games, the plus 130 for Quinnipiac, minus 160 for Michigan, seems about right. Interestingly enough, in this one, the over-under of 6, it's a plus 100 on the over and a minus 130 on the under. And if it's an under game, that tends to lean a little bit in Quinnipiac's direction, it seems.
200%. I think if this game stays 2-1, 3-1, I give the Bobcats a better chance to win than Michigan. I think Michigan needs to get out and play their game and do their skating. I could hear Jess Myers talking about, if Yanni perhaps lets in the early goal, what does it do? But if he doesn't, what does it do mentally to Michigan? Oh, boy, we're not going to score. It's going to be another one of those nights, another one of those tight games. They had a tight national semifinal last year that they had to try to rally from a deficit and ended up losing in overtime. They had a tight regional final this year against Penn State. So, I mean, they've been in some of these tight games. Now it's the national stage. It is the big stage. How do they react? I think that becomes a big question.
Derek, with these 4 teams, what are the, for each of those teams, let's start with the BU and Minnesota matchup. What does each of those teams have to do to be successful tonight? Oop. I'll turn you back on here.
You're silencing me. I think I said it with Jess, and when my question is the defense. I think the defense's ability to push the puck up the ice and the defenseman's ability to play within. I think it's a battle of 2 outstanding defensemen. We talk about all the forwards and all the but you've got really, really good defensemen. I just said that, hey, 3 of the guys could be playing in the NHL. Then you got Lane Hudson and the other team that should be a Hobie Baker finalist. So I think that's what you look for in that first game. Whose D can get back to pucks and turn them up quickly, push the pace forward, and get the puck in the forward's hands. I think that's one of the uniqueness of this, and we've got no surprises in goal, really, for any of these teams. These have been the guys that have carried them. There hasn't been anybody come out of the woodwork. These are, if you list probably the top 10 goalies at the beginning of the year, you probably would have all of them in there.
I think you're right about that.
Maybe Close might be down towards the end, but he's earned it only because he had played a half a game. So I think that you're looking at both D and the ability from their D. I mean, you talk about building teams, you build with good defensemen and mobile defensemen, and you got to have a good goalie. So I'm looking at the defense, which defense handles pucks better and gets it up to the forward's hands. And, good points were made. I mean, Hudson could play 40 minutes tonight with all the TV timeouts.
Yeah. Now, on the other matchup, you talked a little bit about that 1-3-1 that Quinnipiac runs to really clog up the neutral zone. Is that the key for them? Is that the key for Michigan to be able to overcome that lockdown sort of play of Quinnipiac?
I alluded to it. Mike Corbett at Quinnipiac worked for me. He said one of the things that they do is they know who they are and they just work on that, and they never, ever change from it. And this 1-3-1 has been something that's been very successful with them. But I think you can clog up the forwards. You can get them. And that was my question to Jess. Will they dump the puck? Well, I think when you get a lot of those high-skilled forwards like Fantilli and those guys, they don't want to get rid of it. And that's what everybody always says. Hold on to it, hold on to it, hold on to it until you're turning it over and it's coming back the other way. So I think that Michigan's ability to adapt to what Quinnipiac does and then throw something at them that Quinnipiac's going to have to adapt to. And that's it's ultimately a chess match. There's been something that these teams have put in place over the last 10 days to counter something teams have done well. So then when you do that, how do you react to that? If you're just going to stick and pound the same square peg through a round hole, it's not going to work. You're going to have to adapt, and you're going to have to change your game.
Are we going to be able to tell that from Michigan right away? Are we going to see them dump or maybe up high off the glass? Or are we going to get an indication, do you think, early on that they're playing around?
It depends if they start turning pucks over.
Yeah.
If they turn pucks over, then they don't want to adapt. They don't want to go against putting pucks behind. They've got to get on. They've got to get the pucks behind the three, and then pressure the one guy hard. We would always, like I said, put three. We would try to stretch three guys or two guys and get them in a lane, and then tip, and then get people coming with speed and forecheck hard on the one guy back. And I mean, they've been very successful with it. So we'll see if the 1-3-1 that Quinnipiac is running, if they continue. You'll see Michigan not putting. Where you'll know is if they're turning pucks over and they're not putting it behind the three, and if Quinnipiac's pinning them down a little bit, because they're so good at that.
I have to think that one indication for Michigan of success, if they are not getting through that 1-3-1, will be shortening their passes, because they do try to stretch that ice sometime. And if they can get that shorter pass to the neutral zone and then skate and maybe just get past the D with some speed, that can change things for them if they're not just going to be able to skate. And I don't think they're just going to be able to skate freely through the neutral zone. If they are, it's going to be 5-1 quick.
You also have to support the puck.
Very much so.
So you got to get, if you're going to come back and you're going to be in a lot of those what we call set breakouts where you're stopping, and you're going to have to get somebody going with speed, but you're going to have to somebody, you say, be able to get an indirect pass or get a short pass. And if you're not supporting, if there's too much separation or too much length between them, it's going to come back in a quick hurry on them. They got to be around the puck.
Yeah, I think even going to BU in Minnesota as well, I think for BU, one of the successes that they have is when they get the pucks in back of defense and the defense are playing with their backs to the blue line, basically, that's when BU forces mistakes. If BU does not get in back of the D, I think the same thing is going to go for Quinnipiac. If they don't get in back of the D, I'm sorry, for Michigan. If Michigan can't get in back of that Quinnipiac D, it's going to be hard to generate those, because all your shots just end up coming from the outside. You might put up 35 shots, but if you don't have 15 grade A's in that, you're not really getting any value.
I'm also going to look for Peretz. How is he going to be able to handle the stage? And so you got Peretz and he's playing against Portillo, who was there last year. Close was there last year. They played in Frozen Fours. How are the two goalies that haven't been there before? How are they going to deal with Bright Lights big stage?
I'm also going to be interested in seeing how two teams that were disappointed last year, how they come back. Michigan last year, you had their older fourth line guys, not the stars, who were making the difference. You had a guy like Luke Hughes who kind of got undressed at one point. How are those second-year guys going to think about this and come back and realize, hey, we messed up last year, this is our time to get it done?
I wanted to ask those guys, and they kind of throw it out, who's somebody we should look at. That's the first time Luke Hughes has been talked about since we've been here. We've talked about the 3D on Minnesota. We've talked about Hudson. I think that he might be the one that's laying in the shadows a little bit, not because everybody's talking about the other people. They're talking about Fantilli. They're not talking about him being that guy. I think Luke Hughes could really, really step up.
He's a guy, when you're just watching the game, he stands out because of his playmaking, his skating. He's a beautiful skater. I mean, maybe it's his turn to step up, because this is going to be at most his last two games as a Wolverine.
I mean, you do have to look at those types of players, but I still go back to the fact that it's kind of where you're going with Luke Hughes there too. You're looking at teams that have great third and fourth lines. They can produce. I would not be surprised to see both teams shut down, have both of their first line shut down, and the role players be the ones that kind of pace the offense. We've seen it so much in this postseason whether it be the regionals or the league tournaments, where it was not always the name brand players that are making the big plays.
It's like Heather Weems said, you can't teach experience. You have to live that and learn it.
And this is not the like we walked in with Michigan last year. They were the sexy favorites. They were the favorites that everybody. They're not really there's no favorites here. I said yesterday, you got 1, 2, 3, and 5. You wouldn't be surprised if any other team won.
No.
I think Michigan, the expectations aren't as high as they were, so I think you're really going to see this change, and you're going to see a really good game.
So this is the point that we've probably been dreading as we wrap up. Predictions.
You dread it. I love it.
Well, there you go.
None of us picked Denver last year.
Yeah. Denver's not here, so we don't have to worry about that.
I haven't picked a winner in a Frozen Four since probably St.
We're not
Paul.
picking the winner yet, or we're just picking the winners.
I haven't picked a winner of a game in the Frozen Four.
Okay, so let's take the first game, BU and Minnesota. Jim, I'll let you go first.
I'll go BU in this one. Low-scoring game, 3-2, maybe overtime.
Minnesota, 4-2.
I'm going to stick with Minnesota. I picked them in my bracket. I'm going to say 5-2, the fifth one, an empty netter. But I'm saying Minnesota to move on to the championship.
Screwing up that over-under.
That's right. Everybody who threw that in there, they can watch for that. The other game, Michigan and Quinnipiac.
I'm going to call it tie.
I'll go Michigan. I think that they're back. They're ready to do it.
I hate it. I hate where I feel Michigan's going to win too. I hate because we've been on this Big Ten kick, and I'd love to see Quinnipiac, but I think it's going to be Michigan. Probably, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm going to go about 6-3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're going to pick the over. I'm going to pick Michigan, but I think 4-1 again, maybe an empty netter late. A tight game most of the way through.
There's some high-scoring games, though.
Yeah, I'm going to go Michigan, and they're going to start blowing it early. I think that this would be 6-1, but I'll give Quinnipiac the credit. They're going to score a couple. I'll say 5-2. Just I don't want to say 6-3, just like your schools.
Yeah.
I like the over.
And it pains me. Like I said, I really would love to see Mike Corbett go. He's been great. He was at Air Force Huntsville. Robert Morris, great assistant coach, great head coach, great guy. And I just texted him, wished him good luck. But I just got to go with my eyes. I can't go with my heart on this.
So, Jim, BU, Derek, and I, Minnesota, and all of us, Michigan. On the other one.
Quinnipiac's going to win the national championship.
Well, if past
congratulations to the Bobcats.
Well, let's wrap it up here from Harpoon Harry's.
It's been an adventure.
It has been an adventure because it's more than just a restaurant.
But they keep pushing us our area because BU is taking up more and more spots.
Well, they keep bringing in more balloons. Yeah, that's what it is.
More and more, like we're getting pushed in the corner.
The walls are closing in.
Yes, it means it's time to go.
So for Derek Schooley, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Frozen Four live from Tampa.